Welcome to In the Arena of Success. This podcast is where courage meets opportunity. I'm your host, Henry Beeman, and every week we step into the arena with visionaries, innovators, and trailblazers from all walks of life. We dive deep into the heart of success and uncover the strategies, the struggles, and the unwavering spirit of those who overcome. The real question is, are you willing to step into the arena and fight for your success? Because in this arena, success is not a destination. It's a journey, and it starts right now. All right, Major General Gregg Martin, thank you so much for being here with me today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
The way I start the podcast with every guest is a quick lightning round of 6 questions that we run through and get to know a little bit about you. So the first question is, what's your hometown and what is it known for?
My hometown is Holbrook, Massachusetts. It's known for great sports teams, lots of fun, being close to Boston and the pro sports teams. And then the other town, the town I was actually born in, is called Brockton, Mass. And it had famous boxers like Rocky Marciano, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And so that's a little bit about my hometown.
So you grew up a sports fan, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah, all the Boston teams, Celtics, Bruins,
Absolutely.
Red Sox, Patriots.
So the next question on our list here is, do you prefer dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Same here. I have a young Aussie doodle, an Australian Shepherd Poodle mix. He's about 6 months old and love him to death. What kind of music would folks find you listening to?
Rock and roll.
What's on your reading list?
I'm reading a book called Big and Strong but Not in Charge, and it's about the vulnerability aspect of leadership. It's written by a retired general, so I'm reading that. I read a book called Kidnapped, which is about a guy from South Africa, and I'm friends with him and his wife. He was kidnapped and held hostage in Nigeria. Read that. Another book I read, or I'm reading, is called You Are Not Alone, written by the head doctor at NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So that's a really good book about mental illness, getting help, how to get treated, how to deal with it. So those are just a few of the books I'm reading.
Those sound like some good reads and quite a variety there that has different perspectives. The Hostages book sounds pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, I also I've got another one called, I think it's called Saving Lives. It's about the history of Coast Guard divers, swimmers. So, they come out of helicopters and they rescue people, fishermen, people at sea. And so that's one I want to read too.
That sounds really exciting. So that kind of segues into the next question, is who is your biggest inspiration in life?
Ooh, my biggest inspiration. Probably going back to an early age, it's a guy named John Havlicek, who was an all-star for the Boston Celtics, and he won 8 NBA titles. He was the most valuable player, one of the leading scorers of all times, one of the greatest defensive players in the history of pro basketball. He was a sixth man for a long time. But I loved Havlicek, everything about him, his hustle, his determination, the way he was in the best shape of anybody on the team. And he just played with a relentless intensity and spirit that captivated me. And he became my role model growing up for not only basketball, but for really all endeavors. And I even thought about him as an Army officer, just all out intensity, hustle, can-do spirit, give it everything you have.
Those are all a lot of the same attributes that you find in most successful people. So the next question that follows right along with that is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Always do your best. Always do the right thing. Always treat people by the golden rule. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. And so those 3 principles were essentially, they were the elements of my command philosophy the whole time in the Army. But I was given another piece of great information from my mother that if I had followed, I would have been a healthier person. She said, number 1, you need more sleep. You're not getting enough sleep. Number 2, you drink too much alcohol. Don't drink so much. Number 3, you take your job way too seriously. You need to kind of dial back and don't take your work so seriously, because if you die the Army's just going to they're going to bury you and get somebody new, and the Army's going to keep rolling along. So don't take yourself that seriously. So those are two different, angles on good advice that I've gotten.
Absolutely. And in fact, my in-laws for Christmas gave me a coffee mug with a quote from Oscar Wilde on it that says, "Life's too important to be taken so seriously."
Good one.
I think that sums that up pretty well.
Yeah.
So moving into the interview, what was it about you as a young person growing up that drew you towards military service?
Well, I had a family tradition of service. So my dad was in the Navy in World War II. All my uncles were in some service, Army, Navy, Coast Guard. And so it was just something that I thought, I am going to serve in the military in some capacity or another, whether it was enlisted, officer, what have you, whatever service. And so I had a very positive attitude and what they call a strong propensity for service right from the get-go. But when I was applying, when I went to college, I started looking at where can I get the most bang for the buck? What college opportunities are out there that will give me a great education at the rock bottom price? And of course, I found out about the academies, the service academies, and I applied to all of them. And West Point accepted me, and so that's where I went. And there were a few ups and downs at West Point, but once I got settled in, it was full steam ahead. I didn't look back. I was excited to accept the challenge of being an officer for 5 years out in the Army. And, I really, once I got out there and, as a platoon leader, then a company commander, I never really looked back. And the next thing you know, I was a 2-star general, retiring with more than 30 years of service.
So when you went into the academy, you would say that you didn't go in with the standpoint of, I'm going to spend a career here necessarily.
That's correct. I mean, when I went in, basically I said, I'm going to go there for the summer. And because you could leave Beast Barracks, the cadet basic training, you could leave with no questions asked. And so once I got into it, I said, okay, no problem. I'm going to stay for the whole plebe year, freshman year. And so I did. And I did really, really well, got good grades, was really high in physical education, good leadership scores. And so then I went through the whole first year and I said, I'm going to stay for the second year, because then after 2 years, you can also drop out or leave with no penalty. So I stayed for the whole second year. And then at that point, there was no turning back. I just stayed for the whole 4 years, did well as a cadet, ranked very high in the class. And then when it came time to the 5-year commitment, I said, okay, I'm going to do my 5 years the best I can, try my hardest, be the best leader I can. But I have no illusions about staying in for a career. I'll just see how it goes. But once I got out in the Army, I really loved it. Loved being a platoon leader, leading soldiers, loved being a company commander. And so I never even thought about getting out at the 5-year point. I just kept looking forward, moving ahead, and just was on a roll. And I stayed in the Army for, over 3 decades.
So as you're coming up through that time as a platoon leader, captain, as a company commander, those are pretty formative years, and leading 40, 50, 100 to maybe up to 200 troops at that time. What were some of the experiences that you had then that were formative for you later on in your career as you progressed?
Well, I was stationed in Germany during the Cold War, and it was pretty tense. We had the Soviet Army and the Warsaw Pact armies right across the border in East Germany. And so having that really serious, important, potentially deadly Cold War mission on the front lines of freedom, that was a very formative experience that, drilled into us the need for combat readiness, taking care of soldiers, taking care of equipment, being tactically and technically proficient, doing rehearsals and making sure the unit is organized and on point. So that was a really big formative experience. The second big one was when we weren't training and preparing for war, we did big, huge, massive construction projects because I was an engineer. And the scale and the scope and the complexity of these projects, particularly the Grafenwehr range upgrade projects, these were huge, challenging, difficult missions. And again, I really learned about, taking care of soldiers, taking care of equipment, the importance of rehearsals, attention to detail, taking care of your troops so that they're not going to burn out, giving them, working them hard, but making sure they have time for their families, for personal time, learning the technical and the tactical situation, and executing complicated missions to standard. That really had a big role in my development that later really paid off. When I was in Iraq, for example. Another big one that was a little bit later, but was the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California. That was a huge formative experience because in many, many ways, the training at the NTC was harder and more demanding than actual combat. The OPFOR was better than the Iraqi army. The demands on your planning and your execution were really higher than in real combat. The only thing that we didn't have was real explosions, real bullets, people getting killed and wounded. Biggest formative experiences that I had.
No, I think that's a really valid point, and something that's applicable whether you're in or out of the military, but it's repeated exposure to the challenges that you're going to face. If you're in sales and you know that you hear no a lot when you go to talk to people, same thing in military recruiting, you have to repeatedly expose yourself to that environment, in many cases in a way that's even tougher than what the real world is going to be, to develop that muscle memory. So as you're coming through those experiences, you progress up in rank. What was there a point in time when you thought to yourself, I've made it, I've achieved what I've come here to achieve?
Well, when I got promoted to captain at the 4 or 5 year point in the Army, I was just so happy that I made captain and that I got to be a company commander. I said, wow, I've really achieved a lot. And so I was very grateful and happy with where I was at that point. I said, anything after this is probably going to be gravy. And then the next thing, I went to grad school, and the Army sent me to MIT to get one master's degree in engineering. And I came out with 2 masters and a PhD, which is really reflective of having a bipolar brain, having that elevated chemistry in my brain that enabled me to achieve way more than is normal. So the MIT experience was really a huge confidence builder. And then I think when I went and graduated from Command and General Staff College, that was a big deal. Validation that I was on track in the Army education system. And then I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I was, a battalion XO, a battalion S3, a corps level staff officer, and I did a deployment to Honduras for a year. Those were all really great experiences that gave me a lot of confidence. And then I got to teach at West Point, and that was a big confidence builder because it was very exhilarating to be up on the platform every day teaching a bunch of smart cadets. And I learned and grew a lot professionally. And then I'd say another one was battalion level command. That was a huge experience, tremendous responsibility, a lot of fun, excitement, adventure, NTC rotations. We were on the short list to deploy to numerous war zones. And then I went to the Army War College, which is, a graduate program in strategic studies. And then I was a brigade commander, which was the highlight of my whole career. Being a brigade commander in Germany, then deploying to Kuwait, then invading Iraq, and then being in combat for a year, leading over 10,000 soldiers was really the highlight of my entire career. After that, I had a bunch of jobs as a general, but that brigade command in combat, that was really the ultimate.
Absolutely. What do you think, because I don't want to get into the bipolar diagnosis too early, but aside from that, your time in brigade command, what do you think it was that made you successful? Because that was a very arduous and challenging assignment.
Well, I was very well prepared. The Army does a terrific job over the course of a career of developing its leaders through all the progressive levels of assignment and schooling and all the experience you get. So, I mean, thanks to the Army, I was very well prepared to be a brigade commander. I mean, I knew what I was doing. I had a lot of experience. I had the good interpersonal skills, down with the soldiers, with my peers on my left and right, and with my higher level commander. So I got along well with everybody. So that was number one, preparation. Number two, I was highly motivated. I mean, I wanted to be a brigade commander. I wanted to do well. I really cared and wanted to take good care of my troops. I wanted us to be really well trained, well prepared, the maintenance of our equipment to be the best it could be. Wanted to develop the best war plan we could because we knew we were going to go to war. So, I wanted to go there with the best probability of success that we could have. So, right. I wanted to do it. And then I worked very, very hard. I mean, I worked tirelessly. Some people would probably say I worked too hard. But that's what I did. And, we worked unbelievably long, hard hours to get ready to deploy and then to be in the fight. And then I tried to make it as enjoyable as I could for my people. We tried to do things that would build esprit de corps. We tried to build in fun and, rejuvenation and resiliency wherever we could into the schedule and into the plan. And then last but not least, I did my best to try to, take care of the family front, marriage, kids, spending as much time with them as I could, given the intense training and deployment schedule.
So one of the things that you mentioned multiple times there for being successful is training and preparedness. Tell me a little bit about your stance on training and preparedness, because I think you see a lot of folks today think of success and you see on social media people kind of cherry pick the things that they share about, and success almost has an air of appearing easy today. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you pushed through and had to train for and prepare for.
Well, as far as training and preparation, it starts with each individual, being prepared, mind, body, spirit, to deploy, fight, win. So you have to be, mentally engaged and mentally prepared that your job is to deploy and go into war. And so that means you need to be up on, tactics, techniques, procedures. You need to understand your weapons, your equipment. You need to understand how to plan, how to supervise, how to manage the operation. You need to be physically fit, in shape, with endurance and a lot of grit, which is, the ability to just keep going, keep fighting, never give up, keep pushing through to the objective. And a lot of that is physical fitness, physical toughness, but it also combines into mental toughness, mental grit, mental resilience, and then spirit. Believing that you're serving a higher cause, a cause greater than self, that you're doing something to benefit other people. So every person, every soldier needs to be grounded in all of that. And that's something that you have to talk about, teach, and train on. And I did that all the way from platoon leader up to brigade commander and then as a general. Then you have to get into the collective training. What's your mission? And then what's your mission essential task list? So as an engineer deployable unit, we knew we had to be able to deploy, which meant getting to a railhead with all of our equipment and then railing to a ship, getting on a ship, then, offloading at the port. And then in combat, we had to be able to breach obstacles, so you had to figure out what different kinds of obstacles are there. How do you breach the obstacles? What equipment do you need? What are the tactics, techniques, and procedures? And so you go through your entire list of missions and you you focus like a laser beam on which ones are the most important, the most critical to mission success. And then you train relentlessly on those, from the individual soldier to the crew, to the squad, to the platoon, to the company, to the battalion, to all the way to the brigade. And you just focus on those, and you make sure you master those tasks and drills so you can do them in war.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the one word that really struck me is mastery. So let's now fast forward a little bit. Post brigade command, you're a general officer at the National Defense University, and you face some pretty big giants with your mental health.
Well, I was born with a bipolar brain unknowingly. I was living on the bipolar spectrum unknowingly for my entire life. And it essentially, by producing extra amounts of dopamine and other powerful chemicals, it essentially boosted me and enhanced my performance for years and decades by giving me excess energy, drive, enthusiasm, creativity, problem-solving skills. And that was a condition called hyperthymia. But unknowingly, I was inching year by year towards bipolar disorder, which is inherent in hyperthymia. And so I didn't know it, but when we were in Iraq, that year of combat in Iraq, my genetic predisposition for bipolar disorder was triggered by the intense stress, euphoria, and thrill of combat. And that judgment was made by both the VA and the Army Medical Department, who both did independent investigations on how did General Martin come down with bipolar disorder at such a late age. And they both came up with that my onset was in 2003 at age 47 in Iraq. Now, over the next 12 years as a general, I went into higher levels of mania, lower levels of depression, and I started to develop psychosis, which are delusions and hallucinations. And so I started going to higher highs and lower lows over the next 12 years. But again, my bipolar disorder was unknown, unrecognized, undiagnosed until 2014, 11 years after onset. I rocketed into full-blown mania, where essentially I went into a state of madness, insanity. I was over the top, out of control, over the edge. And so it was so obvious to people that there was something wrong with me mentally, psychologically, emotionally, that they started writing anonymous letters to my boss, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey. They wrote letters saying, hey, we don't know what's wrong with General Martin, but here's the behaviors we're seeing, and we're really concerned about him, and he's really disruptive, and he's kind of scary, he's frightening people, and it's actually kind of terrifying. So General Dempsey took all that aboard. And by the way, I knew General Dempsey really well. He was a friend, a mentor. I had worked for him 4 different times. He hired me for the job at NDU to transform the place. But General Dempsey took it all aboard, and he did a very thorough investigation, and he came to the conclusion that there was something wrong with me. Something had gone wrong psychologically, emotionally, mentally. And so he basically called me into his office and said, Greg, I love you like a brother. This was in the Pentagon in July of 2014. I had gotten an order to report to his office on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock. He said, Greg, I love you like a brother. You've done an amazing job. Nobody could have done what you did in just 2 years. I give you a grade of A+, but your time at NDU is over. You have until 5 p.m. today to resign, or I will fire you. And I'm ordering you to get a psychiatric evaluation this week at Walter Reed. What are your questions? I said, no question, sir. This is great news, because God put me here at NDU to do big things. Now he's going to put me somewhere else to do even bigger things. And ironically or paradoxically, I was right, because that was 10 years ago in 2014. So now, 10 years later, I'm doing the most important work of my life, which is, my bipolar advocacy, my mental health advocacy, writing the book, writing articles, giving, dozens and dozens of talks and interviews and podcasts. So that was basically it. So I resigned that day. And then the rest of the story is, I got the psych evals, but they said, you're fit for duty. There's nothing wrong with you. And I got evaluated 3 times while I was in a state of full-blown mania. And the doctor said, you're fine. But over the next 3 months, 4 months, I spiraled and then crashed into terrible, crippling, hopeless depression and terrifying psychosis. And I was so bad that I went back to the Walter Reed, to the doctor, and said, hey, there's something really wrong with me. And the doctor then was able to get collateral information from my wife and piece together, connect the dots that I was manic and now I'm depressed. Looks like bipolar disorder. So he gave me a diagnosis of bipolar disorder type 1 with psychotic features. And right there in the doctor's office, I thanked him. I gave him a hug and said, thank you, because I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what. Now with this diagnosis, I have a target with a face on it. I can go to battle against bipolar disorder and start my recovery. Unfortunately, I went from bad to worse, and I got more and more depressed, retired from the Army, and I was in bipolar hell for 2 years. Wow. Was forced to retire from the Army, then was hospitalized at a VA facility. And it wasn't until the fall of 2016, almost 8 years ago, that I got prescribed lithium on top of the other medications, and that was really the start of my recovery.
Wow, that's really incredible. And the thing that I think is often missed, that you saw even in that doctor's office that day in Walter Reed, is the diagnosis of bipolar wasn't a stigmatizing label, but rather a target that gave you something that now you can fix.
Yes, it did. Getting a diagnosis is absolutely critical. And some people, are scared of their diagnosis, or they're in denial, or they're ashamed or whatever. But I knew, from my reading and just from my own experience before my diagnosis, I knew that it was something physical in my brain. Because how does a person go from super high energy level to no energy, withdrawn, confused? How do you go from so high to so low without it being something physical in the brain with the production and distribution of these powerful chemicals? I said, it defies common sense. It's clearly a physical condition of the brain. And so I said, if it's physical, it's not that much different theoretically than diabetes, heart disease, cancer. So what the heck are people ashamed of? Why are they stigmatized? They're just letting fear and ignorance control their life. And I just said, I'm not going to do that.
Right. That's incredible. Tell me about the times you said you spent 2 years in bipolar hell. What is it that drug you out of that? What was it that helped you emerge from that?
So it was a combination of things that helped pull me out of bipolar hell. And I would say just sort of in this order. Number one, being hospitalized was a big step forward. It didn't make me better, but it kept me from getting worse. And the VA hospital in White River Junction, Vermont was really terrific. Multidisciplinary team. They helped me stabilize. So I stopped getting worse, which was a big step. Even though I didn't get better, I stopped getting worse. Number two, I had my wife and a really close battle buddy that never gave up on me, and I never gave up on myself. So I wanted to get better, and my battle buddy and my wife, they were willing to help me get the help I needed to get better. Third was the medications. Lithium was a breakthrough medication. Prior to lithium, I couldn't break the depression. I mean, they tried electroconvulsive therapy, they tried other medications, but nothing worked. But once I tried lithium, and it was in combination with other medications like lamotrigine and lorazepam, but anyway, the lithium put me over the top. The symptoms pretty much went away. And so those were all breakthrough things. The other thing is I had some really bad delusions that people were out to get me and, get me arrested and put in jail. And based on the encouragement of one of my sons, I confronted the people I suspected that I had these paranoid delusions. And they said, hey, we're not out to get you. Nothing could be further from the truth. We care about you. We like you. We love you. And so by confronting them directly with the encouragement of my son, that helped break the delusions and help get me in a better place. So that was really key. The next big thing is we made a decision to move from New Hampshire to Florida. And the reason we did it was, New Hampshire is beautiful, but it's a long, cold, dark, gray, icy, snowy winter that goes on for months and months. And I had read through my research that, the sunshine, the brightness, the warmth of a semi-tropical or tropical location can really make a difference in brain function. And so we took a little bit of a risk and we moved to Florida. And that was a great move. And I think it's really helped me a lot. And then I started, really increasing my healthfulness in my living, healthy diet, lots of exercise, plenty of sleep. I was seeing a psychiatrist, seeing a therapist. And then and those three elements are really necessary, but not sufficient for a recovery. For a recovery to be built to last, you have to anchor it into the 5 Ps, which I think are purpose. So I developed a purpose for my life, which, in the military, you always have a purpose and a mission. But once you're out, you have to develop it yourself. So mine is sharing my bipolar story to help stop the stigma, promote recovery, and save lives. Second is people. I developed a network of friends who are happy, energetic, who lift my spirits. Third is the place. Like I told you, we chose Florida for good reasons. Fourth is perseverance. You have to work on your perseverance every single day because you're going to stumble. There's going to be setbacks. There might be relapses. And you have to have this will to win and this fighting spirit that you're not going to get knocked down. You're going to get back up and keep going. Is perspective. And perspective is the ability to get outside of your own head and think objectively about your own thinking. And the fancy word is metacognition. And it's important because a lot of times our biggest enemy is our own thoughts. Our own thoughts get us in trouble because they're oftentimes wrong. And so those 5 Ps are a huge part of my recovery and my life.
Wow. That's incredible. I think those 5 Ps are more than just credible to recovery, but that's a life lesson in and of itself right there, on leadership, on achieving success, or facing any challenge that you come in front of. Where did you come up with that process? What led you to think of the 5 Ps?
Well, the whole picture came about through reading, through study, talking to psychiatrists, to therapists, learning about health in recovery. And then the 5 Ps, the first 3 Ps, the purpose, people, and place, I actually got it from a book called Healing, Our Path from Mental Illness to Mental Health by Dr. Thomas Insel. He talked about the 3 Ps. And then I essentially adopted those and footnoted and gave him credit for the idea. And then, though, I said, it's not just the 3 Ps. There's more than the 3 Ps. There's perseverance and there's perspective. So I modified it to the 5 Ps.
That's really great. So looking back, as you've come through that really an intense challenge, the end of your military career, once you became healthy, what were some of your first steps coming out of the darkness, if you will? Where did you start?
Well, I started taking lithium in August of 2020, and within days of taking lithium, my energy came back. My interests came back. I started getting active again. I had energy. I was interested in people and talking to people. I smiled again. I started having fun again. And all of this after 2 years of severe, hopeless, crippling depression with terrifying psychosis. So once I started coming back, I said, okay, I gotta do something to start getting myself back in shape, because I lost about 25 pounds of muscle during those 2 years. I mean, literally, depression just wasted me away. I mean, so I was skinny, my muscles had shrunk. I couldn't do any more. I used to be able to do 100 push-ups with no problem, couldn't do any. Used to be able to do 25 pull-ups, no problem, couldn't do any. And so I said, I've got to get myself back in shape. So I started working out. I started, walking, running on the beach, swimming, lifting weights, riding my bike, and really working hard to get back in shape. The other thing is that during the 2 years of bipolar hell, my spiritual life just went black. I mean, it went dead. So I said, I got to start going to church again. I want to start reading devotionals, reading, uplifting, spiritual, religious material that's going to, really feed my soul. So I started doing that. I really started spending more time with my family. So with my wife, who I had pretty much ignored for 2 years, but, doing things together, having date nights, going for walks. We both got gym memberships. So we would take, we would take classes together at the gym, do yoga classes together, fitness class, and other things. We started going out on the weekend nights to, out to eat, out to, socialize. So, the faith was huge. The family and marriage was good. The fitness was a huge part of my recovery. So faith, family, fitness. I started really spending time with friends. My wife and I had a strategy called make a friend, be a friend. And we tried in Florida, where we were new and didn't know anybody, to meet a new friend every day. And it was usually at the gym, but every day we tried to meet somebody. And then if we hit it off, we try to develop the friendship by, going out to lunch or going out to coffee or, getting together for dinner. And then fun. I mean, I just started, laughing again and trying to have fun. And I got in a dancing class that was really, really fun with, good music, fun dancing. And so I came alive again. And those were sort of the elements, the pillars of my success.
That's incredible. So something that you hit on that I wanted to tug on just a little bit more is your faith. We've talked a lot about how you've developed strength in other areas of your life. As you regained strength mentally, you regained physical strength. Tell me about that kind of third foundational pillar, if you will, of your faith and what that's meant to you.
Well, I was a cradle Catholic, meaning, grew up in a Catholic family. And then when I went away to the University of Maine for 1 year, I ended up having a really positive encounter with one of the campus evangelical ministries. And so I became, at the age of 18, a born-again Christian. And so I then, really started putting my faith in these, in kind of, an evangelical Protestant form of worship and belief. But then I met my wife, who was Catholic, and we got married in the Catholic Church. We raised our kids Catholic. So I had kind of a dual track religious faith life. One
Right.
Catholic, and then simultaneously evangelical, non-denominational Protestant. And that was kind of my track for, all my years and decades in the Army. So I had sort of two faith tracks. And, I think it served me well. When I went into the severe depression, I just pretty much went dark on all religion. And so when we moved to Florida, I said, I'm going to resurrect these two faith traditions. And so I did. My wife and I started going to the local Catholic church, which was very good. And then there was an evangelical church in town, started going to that as well. And so not only would I go to the services, I would do the men's studies, do Bible studies, prayer breakfasts, all the sort of ancillary activities, homeless shelters, food collection for poor people, all that kind of stuff. And so that was sort of the track I took for a number of years with both of those faith traditions, and it was good. I really enjoyed it, and I think both elements gave me spiritual strength that was good for me.
Absolutely, and it's a important piece that I think a lot of folks sometimes miss out on is having that faith background gives you another element of support, whether it's even if it's just the friendships and, like you said, the men's group and the prayer breakfast and those things that you go to and meet with other folks that can circle around you and provide you some commonality and friendship and companionship as you're going through struggles in life. Because so many of the people we run into in life are there for some other purpose, but those types of individuals are typically there in an iron sharpens iron kind of mentality and making each other better.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's iron sharpens iron is a really good way to put it.
So I want to know, as you've progressed even further now into advocacy and being a role model and being a voice, to me, that's what's really, really inspiring about your story. And not to have any sort of disrespect, but the fact that you were a two-star general is almost minimized. You faced this major challenge, and now you're impacting the world of mental health in such an incredible way. And I think that's what's really important for folks to see, especially those that may struggle with some mental health challenges, but also those who don't, that you can face a storm. You can be told to resign or I'm going to fire you, and you can come back even stronger and do something even more important.
Yes, absolutely. Never in my wildest dreams did I think at this point in my life, my mission, my purpose, all my energy would be focused on sharing my bipolar story and being a mental health advocate and helping to battle stigma. I never would have imagined that. My vision for myself was retire from the Army as, a colonel or a general officer and go get, a really good, lucrative, high-paying, challenging leadership job in the civilian sector. But you know what? God had different plans for me. I got afflicted with bipolar disorder, which is a potentially deadly brain condition. And then the question became, what do I do with this, quote unquote gift? What do I do with it? Do I hide it? Do I make pretend it didn't happen? Do I shrink away from it or embrace it, own it, and, make the most of it in order to serve other people, make a difference and serve a cause greater than myself? And I said right away, I'm going to own this. I'm an Army guy. I'm a, soldier. I'm an Army Ranger. I am not going to let this get me down. I'm not going to hide from it or be embarrassed or ashamed, because that makes no sense. And I owe it to everybody to use this experience and this knowledge that's been given to me through this, really brutal ordeal to help and assist others and inspire others and give other people hope. So that's what I chose to do, and that's what I'm doing.
That's really incredible. So let's talk for just a second about maybe those who are in the depths of that darkness or in that place, and you say, well, I chose to own it, and they don't feel like they can right now. What are some of the steps or some of the advice? I know we've talked a little bit about some of that already. What would you say to that individual?
Well, I was in a position during bipolar hell where I had no hope. I wanted to die. I never thought I was going to get better. And so you have to build yourself up to the point where it's even possible to say, I'm going to own this. I'm going to, work at recovery. And the way that you build yourself up is first, go get into the care of a medical professional. It was a multidisciplinary team that took care of me at the VA. Psychiatrists, therapists, pharmacologists, nurses, chaplain. And so you've got to, surrender yourself to the professional medical care and work with them to get on the right medication to get your brain chemistry in the proper balance. And so that's really job one, is to, surrender to the professional medical community and start to get on solid ground and solid footing again. Then comes the therapy, where you're learning how to think differently and how to solve and navigate complicated problems of your own mind. And then thirdly is this healthy living, a healthy diet, plenty of sleep, plenty of water, low stress, lots of exercise. And then come the 5 Ps. And so I think for someone who doesn't see any hope, you got to sort of pull yourself up like one rung at a time. And rung number 1 is to get right medically and with your brain chemistry. And then the rest of those things can be built up on top of it. And then somewhere along the line, you will have the strength, the wherewithal, the willpower to take it to the next level. And that's where the perseverance really comes in.
Absolutely. That's really powerful. And as you've climbed through those steps personally, when did you face the stigma of bipolar disorder, and how are you combating that now, and what are you doing in your advocacy?
Well, I know that stigma exists widely all around the world. I mean, there's a huge stigma against mental illness where people think that those with mental disorders or mental conditions are crazy or wacko or psycho. They can't be trusted. They're violent. They can't be employed by me. Stay away from them. That exists all over the world. So I knew that. But then there's also a thing called self-stigma, where people take the stigma that's out there in the world and they apply it and focus it in on themselves. And so they then start to multiply and perpetuate this stigma. And I looked at it. I know it exists. I know that what people think, but I just said, it makes no sense. There's not a stigma against people with heart disease or cancer or diabetes or a broken leg, and there shouldn't be against mental illness. And so I'm not going to be beholden to it. I'm not going to let anybody stigmatize me. I'm not going to be embarrassed or ashamed. I'm just going to tell it like it is. It was really interesting. When we moved to Florida, didn't know anybody. I had a VA license plate that says disabled veteran. And people would say, hey, what's your disability? And I'd say, well, I have shoulders, neck, back, hips, feet, knees, but I also have a mental disability. And they would always say, well, what is it? I'd say, bipolar disorder. And every single person I told that story to, and I told it to dozens of people, usually when we were leaving the gym in Cocoa Beach, they would see the car and we'd have this conversation. Every single person said, oh, I have a brain thing too, or a psychiatric thing too, or my husband or wife, or my son or daughter, or my friend, or my neighbor, or my work colleague, or my parents. 100% of the people said, I've got a brain psychiatric thing as well. And so right away, that just lifts the stigma. Get to know someone who lives with a brain condition or a mental illness. It's the greatest weapon against stigma, because then they see, oh, this is a regular person. This person's not whacked out. They're not some kind of weirdo that I need to be afraid of. And so if everybody tells their little story, stigma slowly starts to go away. And so I essentially disarmed people by telling them flat out that I have a bipolar disorder. And then people started saying, wow, thanks for telling me. Thanks for sharing that. You should share that story. Why don't you write an article? Would you speak to the Rotary Club? Would you speak to our church group? Hey, we have a retreat. Can you share that story? And then it just started to snowball. And now, a number of years later, here I am with a book, hundreds of talks, and sharing my story around the world. In fact, I was 2 weeks ago, I was in Brazil. I gave 2 talks in Brazil, one on stigma and one on bipolar general. And the Brazilians translated the book into Portuguese. So we had a book sale and a signing with hundreds. Well, actually, there were 2,000 Brazilians there. But anyway, that's kind of how I've dealt with the stigma.
That's incredible. And since you brought your book up, Bipolar General, tell us a little bit about the book and where folks can find it.
So the book is called Bipolar General, and the subtitle is My Forever War with Mental Illness. And I chose that subtitle because the war's never over. I mean, mental illness stays with you for life. You have to manage it every single day for your life, or it could come, flaring back and take you down again. The book essentially goes into tremendous detail on, the story I've just related. So lots of detail, a lot of stories, a lot of insights, lessons learned, etc. The book, the easiest way to get it is to go to Amazon and just order it, and it's at your house within a day or two. Probably the best place to go to learn about my story and to get as a resource on mental health is my website, bipolargeneral.com. And the website, the landing page, has got a link to Amazon to order the book, Barnes & Noble to order, and then the publisher. And I've also got on the website about 100 talks, podcasts, interviews, etc. and I've got about 25 published articles that I've written in the last several years, on my story on various aspects of mental health and recovery. And then I've got other resources that are available to get into on the website. So I would really encourage people to take a look at it, give it a read. Just a couple other resources just to be aware of. There's a documentary film that's going to come out next year. It's called brainstormthefilm.com. So one word. It's going to be a tremendous documentary film that'll be on PBS in 2025, based on a really good book called Brainstorm by Sarah Schley. Another really good source of information, there's a company called growgrit.com, GROHGRIT.com. They're a company that specializes in mental health and resiliency, that do a lot of work for veterans, hospitals, the military, etc. And then there's a little nonprofit called biaffect.com, and that's BIAFFECT. It's an app you put on your phone, on your smartphone, and it can track moods, whether you're going up or down. And this can be enormously important in preempting bipolar disorder, whether it's mania or depression. So anyway, those are a few other resources as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing those. And so I'm excited to finish your book and make it all the way through.
Great.
It's an incredible story, incredible book, and maybe one day we'll run into each other again and I can get you to sign a copy of it for me.
That'd be great, Henry. I'd love to do that. Thanks for your interest and support.
Absolutely. It's an incredible story, and coming from a healthcare background myself as a nurse, I think these are the types of stories that I want to be able to tell and to share. It's time for things to change, and it's time to start moving in the right direction. And I think you're an incredibly powerful voice, and I can only thank you for taking your position and using that to create a platform.
Thanks, Henry. I really, really appreciate the positive encouragement and feedback. And, just a call to action to everybody out there, all the listeners. Thanks for your interest and support. But do whatever you can to stop the stigma, to, get educated and informed, and then tell other people, the facts, the truth, so that this stigma will go away.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been great to be on. Thanks, Henry, and appreciate what you do. Very important, and you do it really well.
Thank you, sir. Take care. Did you like what you heard on today's podcast? If so, do me a quick favor and hit the like and subscribe button. That way you'll stay updated on all the new content that I publish. Also, visit me on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and tell me what you want to hear more about. I love to hear your comments. That way I can continue to produce content that you love and enjoy. You can also check out my website, henrybeeman.com.